Hello and welcome back to Sideline Stories, Season 2, Episode 6. Today we have a very special guest coming at you from the PMY group. He is the Senior Director of Business Development and Event Presentation, Mike Bonner. How are we doing today, Mike?
I'm doing great. Good to see you, Chase.
Likewise, happy to have you. It's going to be a good conversation for sure. So I did want to kind of jump into the beginnings of your career. On your LinkedIn profile, it says that you started as the senior director of scoreboard and broadcasting at the New York Yankees. I just want to know, what kind of entry level role did you start at the Yankees? Or like, how did you kind of get your foot in the door in the sports industry?
No, it actually started before the Yankees, but I was in local sports and news prior to the Yankees. So I usually don't leave that on my LinkedIn, although I was able to do my first Olympics in 1996 prior to the Yankees. So I was working with WNBC TV. So between my junior and senior year of college, I went to the University of Scranton in Pennsylvania. I interned at WNBC TV in New York. That is the New York affiliate for the NBC network. So we were at 30 Rock, same building as NBC Sports. We were just a couple floors below them. It was a great place to be in Midtown Manhattan. The summer of '94, the Knicks were in the NBA Finals. The Rangers won their first Stanley Cup in 54 years. The baseball strike was happening. There was a whole thing going on with O.J. Simpson at that time as well. Obviously there was some crossover with NBC at that point. There I was just eager and wanting to get involved with local sports as much as I could. So because of, the Knicks and Rangers and all that, I got to do things that probably other interns didn't get to do. I'd go out to Shea Stadium, get sound for our 5, 6, and 11 o'clock news. I would go to Madison Square Garden. I'd go to Yankee Stadium. I'd interview players. I was the hand. You never saw me, but I was the hand that would get sound bites. And I learned how to produce a sportscast. I learned how to direct. I would go into the control room and I'd watch the person who was directing. Shout out to Sue McNeely and Steve James. Watch them how they were directing their broadcast for the entire news, and not and it went beyond just the 5 minutes that I had for sports. I worked with a legend called Len Berman. I still keep in touch with Len to this day. But I fell in love with sports and wanted to get into broadcasting because my dad played high school basketball with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And when Kareem
That's
came
awesome.
in, yeah, and when Kareem came into town as a member of the Lakers against the Nets and Knicks, we would go to the games. We would meet him on the court before the game. We'd go to the locker room after the game. I'd see Magic Johnson and Kurt Rambis and Pat Riley and James Worthy and Michael Cooper, and I was like, wow, this is awesome. And I'd watch people interview these guys, and I'm like, that's a job, like that's amazing. So that's how I kind of knew that I wanted to be in it in some way. When I graduated from school, I got a full-time freelance gig with WNBC TV working in sports. Started out as 2 days a week, so you had to supplement your income. I would log games on the weekends for the network. 2 days a week turned into 6 days a week. I was fortunate enough to do my first Olympics in 1996 in Atlanta, go to my first spring trainings in 1996 with the Yankees and Mets, and really, get my feet wet. What I did learn doing a 5, 6, and 11 o'clock news is that it's a very thankless position. It's a very, what have you done for me lately? You could have a great show at 5 and 6. Something goes wrong at 11 and, the sky was falling. So I didn't know that local news was for me. I wanted to be more hands-on. I wanted to be more calling the shots. So I had an opportunity in 1997, 1998 year to go work for the National Hockey League, NHL Productions back then, in Tappan, New York. and we did a show called NHL Cool Shots where I was a coordinating producer. I would edit some segments, and then others would edit segments, and then we would take all those videos and post that show and put it together weekly at a post production house in New York City. And then I would even go and feed the show out, the domestic version and the international version. So it was a day that started at noon on a Sunday, maybe get a little bit of sleep after the Coast games were over, and then Monday morning drive to New York, put the show together, feed it out, get home at some point late Monday night, and I had Tuesday off. That was that was the big perk of the job. But I, did that 1997, 98. Did a lot of freelance work still, worked with legends like Bob Wolf, um, did some really fun stuff. And then 1999, an opportunity came open with the New York Yankees to be part of their scoreboard and broadcasting department. I mean, that's what they called it back then, scoreboard. It was the old Yankee Stadium, started in 1999 and stayed with that team until 2013. I was part of 5 World Series. We won 3. Yes, I have rings. And I had an opportunity to go to the NFL from there, which was great after, having a family and a couple of kids where, the baseball schedule is kind of unforgiving. So I went to the NFL,
Absolutely.
worked for the Denver Broncos from 2013 to 2016. So I traded Derek Jeter for Peyton Manning. My 3 years with the Broncos, we went to the Super Bowl twice, one in my home state of New Jersey. We lost miserably on the opening snap. It was okay. The next day, I left for Sochi for the Olympics, so we forgot about the Super Bowl really fast. And 2 years later, in Santa Clara at Super Bowl 50, we won in what was Peyton's last game, and ended up being my last game with the Denver Broncos because I had an opportunity to go to a place that I had been talking to at that point for 6 years, and that was the University of Notre Dame, and had the opportunity to run their first ever football video board as an Irish Catholic. That was pretty amazing to me, and loved my time there at Notre Dame. Um, I was responsible for the football video board. I was responsible for our um, ACC network, and then all the live production. And then I got a whole bunch more thrown on me, and it was a little more than I really wanted. And I had an opportunity to go back to the NFL with the Carolina Panthers, so I took that. And then after some personal stuff with my parents passing, it was time to come back to the New York, New Jersey area. And at that point, I felt comfortable in doing so, in that I had built up enough of a client base that I could do what I do on an event basis. And then a little while later, the PMY group reached out and said, "Hey, we'd love for you to continue to do that, but just do it under our umbrella. We're a company that started in Australia, have offices all over the world, and we'd love for you to be, a senior director for us, building up our business, but also still being able to do what you love, calling shows." And that's what I do now. I get on a plane and I go to work, and I do some pretty awesome events across the way. I've been fortunate enough to now do 10 Olympic Games, and with Milan being the last one.
It's truly incredible. And, just from the story you told, like, it's quite a grind to get to where you are. Much respect for a person like yourself, in the stage of your career where you're at. So I did want to kind of step back a little bit to the beginning that you had mentioned. So, what was the biggest challenge in breaking into professional sports media for you specifically? Was it at WNBC, or was it, when you finally got to the Yankees and realized, like, take that fresh breath, I've made it?
Yeah, I think it's a good question because I got my first, I graduated from college in 1995, and I didn't get my first full-time job, with benefits or something stable, until 1999. So it is a grind. I mean, for 4 years, I dealt with, full-time freelance gigs, trying to find opportunities all over the place, whether it was with, other stations at that time, or whether it were team opportunities, or, like I said, the network was there too. Um, so that was a hard part. I mean, thank goodness for my parents, and I was still able to live at home. My dad was a building manager in New York City, so I was able to park in New York City for free and
Nice.
walk over to 30 Rock. And even after I finished college, and in some of those downtimes where wasn't getting enough work on the TV side, I went and worked in my dad's building doing maintenance. I was very fortunate to have that opportunity. So it's not easy, and it only gets harder, as the years go by. So it's one of those things that you have to love it. It just has to be burning inside you. I still to this day love the event, and I don't care if it's the smallest event or the Olympic Games. I love the event. I still get a rush out of it. I still get a rush out of doing something different, being creative, working with an awesome crew, bonding with an awesome crew, and it's what keeps me going and doing so many awesome things.
I mean, there's so much to love about production, especially event like live event production. You work in an incredible industry. So I did want to kind of, you mentioned the Olympics. So I did want to kind of, bounce into that. So you've produced now 10 Olympic games, most recently the one in Milan. How does producing the Olympics differ from, a domestic pro sports or collegiate events?
So you have to remember, when you come to an Olympic game, everything is very temporary. You're working with a crew that you probably don't know. So, for example, this crew, they came from a company called CT Creative Technologies. They're an NEP company. I had a camera operator from Romania, another one from Finland. I had a TD from the UK. I had folks from Ireland, and all over the world, Italy as well, on the crew. Um, and you have to come together very quickly and have I don't know if it's a buy-in or just a shared beliefs. It's that goal of success. To me, it's always most important of the crew and how they're feeling and how they have a voice. I always say it's not my show, it's our show. So I leave it open to the crew if they have ideas, chime in, and then if there's things that I can help them with, I'm always happy to do so. I mean, after games are over, I keep in touch with the crew, and I'm available if they need references, or if they have questions about next steps in their career. It's important. I mean, it seems simple, but it's about being a good person and treating people the right way. So you have to do that and in a very short amount of time. um, and then you work with so many different groups, in Olympic Games. So you work with the broadcaster, you work with the facility, you work with the company that's hired you for what they call their sport presentation. You work with the PA announcer, you work with the DJ, you work with the MCs, you work with the lighting folks. There's a lot to do in a small amount of time. And then I always tell the crew, what we do in game 1 and what we do in game 11 and what we do in game 18 are all going to look, drastically different, because, you continue to improve as you get more and more reps. So that's the big difference. You're doing it in a short amount of time. There's also nuances to whatever country you're in, things that go over really well in some countries, and things that don't in others. I mean, that's kind of the joy of putting those puzzle pieces together and trying to figure all that out, and having success at the end of the day.
And kind of staying on the Olympics note. So, you talk about, there's things that come up here and there. Were there any surprises during the, most recent Milan Olympics that tested your team's skills or creativity?
There's always surprises. I mean, you're, at that point dealing with a venue that is really going down to the wire as far as being ready in time. It's the surprises of um, where we physically are all positioned. I had PA announcer that was ice side in 2 languages. I had a DJ that was on the opposite side of the arena from me on the 2nd floor on a platform with, the audio operator, and or an A2 over there. And then I was in the control room on the 4th floor at the end zone, not, at center ice, with the rest of the crew in kind of a makeshift control room that, we had to, get put together for the games. There's a lot of learning, you're finding out the capabilities of the crew, the capabilities of the equipment that you have, and trying to pivot from there. you know, um, I think the biggest surprise for these past games were there was an expectation that someone on the video production crew would actually serve as a director, calling cameras, and that didn't happen this time around. So I produced and I directed the show this time around, and stuff like that happens, and that's the job of a producer, to recognize those things and come up with solutions.
Well, at the end of the day, it sounds like you did a great job watching from home. Looked great. So, congratulations on that. Kind of taking a step back to, some of your other roles. So you've worked across, collegiate, NFL, international sports. What lessons do you carry from those jobs, and how do they influence your approach to every live event?
I mean, there's so many. Again, I talked about how important it is to hold your crew in the highest regard, and they are. I always say that I'm just a spoke in the wheel. That I'm part of the crew just like the rest of them. Um, that's super important. Hard work, creativity, they seem like just buzzwords, but it's true. I mean, you're putting in long hours. You are um you know getting up super early and showing up super early and staying late, when it's called for, so I take that with me all the time. I always try to do something that isn't gonna be done at another venue. So try to be creative in some way, even just the smallest things. Details are really, really important with me. It's the details. It's the making sure that your DJ's not playing the same song for the same moment in 33 games. It's mixing things up. It's being creative, in music that you choose, in shots that you take. It's having a good eye. I mean, here's a good story. Gold medal game. Team USA wins for the second time. Team USA women won. Team USA men won. There's a whole celebration going on the ice. They're starting to roll out the carpets and get everything ready for the victory ceremonies. One of my camera ops is framing up a shot for me and he starts to pan away. And I said, whoa, 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 pan back left, And I said, push in right there. On that young lady right there. I said, hold that shot. And I take the shot and the young lady goes crazy. And it was Michaela Schifrin. She was in the crowd. She was just enjoying the U.S. victory. And that was a shot that almost didn't happen because literally he was on the shot and started to pan away. I was like, whoa, 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 wait a minute. We also had the opportunity where we had a ton of really cool celebrities that came to see hockey. So we did an interview with Travis Scott, and it was not planned. I sent the camera operator, a field producer, and our field talent, our MC, to his suite. They sweet talked themselves into the suite. They asked if they could do it, and he said, "Yeah, sure, why not?" So we had a live interview with Travis Scott.
That's cool.
It's creating viral moments. We had karaoke cams, and we had John Lennon's "Imagine," and the whole place was singing it. So it's things like that I kind of take with me and say, what are those things? What are the next things? And it's the holding innovation to being, super important into what we do. Never resting on your laurels of, it's a good show. It's what more can we do? So, it's things like mixed reality, it's things like lighting effects, it's things like ice projection, which we had here. Those are those differentiators.
That's very cool. All great experiences, and that's really some cool stories you touched on. So I did want to bounce back to what you mentioned about like long hours, grueling days. So something I frequently ask guests about is the grind, and also just like being able to work life balance. Like, what does your work life balance look like in regards to when you're home? Is there a certain routine you have versus when you're at work, stuff like that?
This is a funny question because it changes over time. I've been doing this 30 plus years now, so work life balance is much different now. Um, I will say that there are sacrifices that you have to make, especially when you're young in this career. You're going to miss, birthdays. You're going to miss holidays. You're going to miss summer vacations. You're going to miss things like that. So you do have to make those sacrifices. The partner that you choose, you hope that they understand what your career is all about and what it goes into. Um, I do my best when I'm away from the event or away from the office, to leave that there. I have two girls that one is in theater, and really probably really doesn't care about what I do for a career in a nice way. I don't mean that. Although she was texting me while at one of the Olympic Games, and she was pretty impressed by a few things. But otherwise, she probably couldn't tell you the teams that were playing, the athletes who were there. That keeps me really grounded. So it's really important to me, to be a good husband and a good dad on those times when I'm home. I got home from the Olympics late on a Monday night into a Tuesday morning around 2 a.m. And you better believe that Tuesday morning at 6:20, I was waking my girls up for school, and I was taking one of them to high school that next day, because that was back to my routine. That was back to being a dad, and not being a venue producer in Italy. So that's really important. It's having your family around these events when they can be. I mean, you can't expect that they're going to acclimate to your life, especially as kids get older, and partners have careers and stuff like that.
Right.
Um, but when you can, um, having them around it is incredible. I mean, my oldest daughter, her first birthday party was on the field at Yankee Stadium. We won the World Series on a Tuesday, and that was the following Sunday.
That's
My
awesome.
my family came to the Olympics and went to one of the games. And oh, by the way, they made it up on the video board. I don't know. They must know someone. So it's those things. I remember being in Santiago, Chile, working the Pan Am games, and my youngest daughter, I said, "Hey, scan this QR code that I texted her," and sure enough, she scanned it, and I said, "Okay, hang tight. I'm going to put you up on the video board here in Chile." And so she was sitting in New York, and we put her up on the board. And of course, I knew I was going to be doing it, so I recorded the feed and shared it with her. So it's those things that you do to try to make the work life balance work. And then, I mean, again, your siblings and your cousins and your parents, like, they understand, that this is what you love to do. And when you could bring them out to the ballpark, bring them out to the football field, bring them out to the rink, or the court, those are some super cool moments. And I never take for granted that, this is what I do for a living, and I get to get paid for these events, but then to experience it with other people, it's awesome. So those are the trade-offs.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, like you've kind of mentioned, and we've discussed, is this is a grind, and that's kind of the reality of the industry. But like you've mentioned, it's all about kind of balancing and getting certain things into routine. I did want to keep at least one more question on the Olympics, since you've 10 Olympics. It's crazy. But what would you say is your favorite moment from all of the Olympics that you've produced and directed?
Um, it's hard to come down with moments. I often will say what like of the 10 what my favorite games are. Which by the way was Paris 2024. Just incredible the way the city just was the backdrop and embraced the games. Um, as far as assignments, being the venue producer and director for ice hockey in the Milan games, that takes the cake at the Olympic Games for best assignment I ever had. Um, there's great moments. It's hard to say, oh, hey, that was that one, that was that one. I mean, being an American who played the game of hockey and still tries to play the game of hockey even at my age, and I have a daughter that plays the game. Um, Being able to cue the American flag to go up for the national anthem twice in these past games for Team USA women and Team USA men, that was pretty incredible. But being playing a small part in the journey of these just incredibly talented athletes, I take such great satisfaction. Doesn't matter what country you're from, whether it's weightlifting or baseball or uh, Nordic combined or skeleton bobsled luge. I've worked a lot of these. I take incredible satisfaction and really enjoy those moments. I always tell the crews that I work with, especially folks that are doing this for the first time, live in the moment. Really enjoy it because it goes by so quickly, and then you look back at it and go, oh, well, I wish I did this or I wish I was part of this during the Olympics. And it's really important to me, especially when I go to a host city and there's host crew there, where I say, these are the games in your backyard. I want you to walk away from these games feeling like, wow, I was a part of that and I contributed to that. So it's hard to come up with this singular moment. But like I said, if I was to say as far as my favorite of the 10 games, Paris for sure takes the cake.
That's awesome. I'm sure that they're all uniquely special in their own way, but that's very cool. So now I kind of wanted to jump into your current role at PMY Group. Talking about what does your day to day look like as senior director of business development and event presentation?
Yeah. So, you spend a lot of time on the business development side, talking to clients, both existing and then prospects, explaining who we are, what we do, the services that we provide, because it's a lot more than just, let's say calling a game. I mean, I can tell you that we've done different things like I've been the producer of a broadcast for tennis at Madison Square Garden. We did the New York Giants draft pick last year in Germany when they selected Cam Scadaboo, and I was the director there on site with Victor Cruz. And again, a little bit different than say a live video board show. That's something you're doing live in the moment for a very short amount of time, and it's being simulcast on ABC and NFL Network. We've done viewing parties in different countries for different clients. And again, that's more about the entertainment and event aspect of it. But again, not seen by thousands of people on a video board, but more for a smaller audience. We do a lot of different things like that. So it's making sure that people realize who we are. We do motion graphics. We have equipment. We have a lot of our own crews. We have engineering support. We do a crowd intelligence platform. So it's really letting people know who we are. And then it's when you have a contract with a different client, and I've been very fortunate to have a lot of return clients, and you're able to kind of plan out what you're going to do for that particular year. It's getting into the meetings, starting those conversations, doing the planning, putting together rundowns, getting other vendors involved for things like special effects, pyro, additional equipment you might need. So it's a lot of planning. And then it's getting on a plane or getting in the car sometimes, not as often as getting on a plane, going to that city, doing the pre-production, loading the content, making sure that everything looks right, everything sounds right. There's always that last minute stuff. It's having those conversations with the crew in advance, with the PA announcers, with the MCs, with the DJs and other entertainment. That all that stuff happens before show day, and it's doing that planning. So that's really what day to day looks like on the both business development side and then the event presentation side.
That's awesome. Definitely very detailed look into what your day to day looks like there. Um, So I did want to kind of talk about, some advice for students that you may have in regards to, so for students aspiring to work in sports or live event media, what advice would you give for them about breaking into the industry? It's very tough to get your foot in the door. What would you say? Is it networking? What does it take?
Networking is really the number one, and it's networking and being creative about it. So the school you went to, where you grew up, finding out those folks that are in your industry that are went to your school or lived in the area that you live now, that had common interests, that um, you know that's going to have you be someone that they take a second look at, because they have a certain connection with you. It's when you get that position, and I always tell folks, on their first day, here's the ball. What do you do with it from this point on is up to you. If you fumble it, it's on you. If you cross the goal line, it's on you. But from this point forward, it's up to you. So it's when you're in that role, doing those things that are going to make you stand out, doing those things in an internship that when your internship ends and the place says, well, we don't want you to go, we're going to come up with a role for you. It's those things. I could tell you when, and again, this is where I was very lucky that I lived where I did. And my dad was managing a building 3 blocks away from where my first internship was. But there were nights that I knew it was going to be a very difficult night for the people working the 11 o'clock news. And I might have been on for the 5 and 6 o'clock and would have been able to leave at 6:30. And there were quite a few nights that I said, I'm going to stick around. And I remember someone saying, well, you only have a certain amount of hours you can give. And I'd say, I'm going to clock out then, and I'm going to stay here and I'm going to log, this game for you and pick out the highlights that you need and help in any way. And that went a long way. And then when I had winter break and in college, I contacted the folks at NBC again and I said, hey, you need any help? I'm around for a month. And I went in and worked with them. I don't think I got paid for it. But I went in and worked for them. And, you show that you care. You show that you're learning. You show that you're there to work hard, and you're appreciated for it. So it's those things that when you get that role. But getting that role, to your original part of your question, you got to be real creative. You're sending emails. You're being a nudge. You're hitting people up on LinkedIn. You're finding out addresses and writing snail mail. How many people get mail anymore? So chances are, if they get it, they might actually open it up. It's being really creative in doing those things. It's at a sporting event, talking to the people, talking to a stage manager that you might see, a camera operator that's on their break or just sitting there. It's striking up conversations. It's asking questions. It's trying to be as creative as you can in finding that role. I tell a lot of folks, you know, it's your first job, not your last job. One of the ways that people get in on professional organizations is through the ticket office. And I found people who went to the ticket office and they absolutely loved it and made a career of it forever. And then I know other people who went through the ticket office and A year later, there was an opening in the marketing department, in operations, and corporate sales and sponsorship, in game presentation, and because they were already in the door, they were an internal candidate, and they were able to move over to a different department. So it's being an authority and knowing about things that are trending. Uh, Sports wagering, it's knowing things like that, and being able to help in some way because you have an advantage of knowing what that's all about. It's knowing things like After Effects and Photoshop and Adobe Premiere Pro, that if you're well versed in those things, there's going to be work for you. It's finding those things. It's knowing as many positions as you can. Um, you know, I I'll pick up a camera every now and then, because if you're going to be a good director, the shots that you want. And as the person on the other side of that camera looking through the lens, what shots the director wants to see. So I'll pick up a camera every now and then and work an event. Again, maybe I'm a glutton for punishment, or I just love the event. But it's making yourself as marketable as you can be.
I think ultimately that's incredible advice for students. There's a lot to unpack there, and I think there's a lot to take away. I did want to jump into, the future of the industry, kind of looking ahead. We're talking about, students' future, and now, what does the future of the industry look like? So you had mentioned, mixed reality, digital projection, stuff like that. What do you see in the next 5 to 10 years? Where are things heading? What is going to be the next technology incorporated into these live event productions?
Well, now you're putting me on the spot as far as the next big thing, but I'll I mean, it's hard to know. Again, data integration is unbelievable, and how that's becoming commonplace, and you're seeing it on things like that Amazon, and a second screen experience, or an alternate experience. Um, what I'd say future, and it's happening right now and will continue to happen. It's the a la carte programming. I mean, people were going nuts last week that the Major League Baseball opening day was on Netflix. That's not going away. So it's the streaming services that are going to have live production. You see it with Apple TV, you see it with Amazon, you see it with Netflix. That is going to continue. So it's that streaming that is really going to be something that'll continue. Things like what you're seeing with Cosm, experiential stuff like that. That immersive, hey, I can't be there, but it's the next closest thing, is something that will continue to grow and be all over the place. Um, I mean, again, it's hard to predict, like, oh, hey, this is, you could say holograms, or things like that. But in the live production world, I mean, you just saw it in Milan, where what they're doing with drones right now is unbelievable. What they did it with ski jumping, and downhill skiing, and bobsled, skeleton, and luge. That is going to continue to be something that is a big part of what we do. We saw sky cams or spider cams used indoors for hockey at the Olympics. You saw cameramen on skates that were capturing stuff within 15 seconds and then getting right back off when games started back up. It's those cool, innovative things. What they're doing with replay technology right now. You're seeing it with Major League Baseball, but you see it with the ACC network that has their command central, if you would, for replays, and you're hearing the other side of it. You're hearing what the ref is hearing in their headset, and the conversation back and forth, and the why on this stuff. Those will continue to be things that grow. And your mixed reality and your augmented reality is just going to get better. I remember when I first did it with the Panthers in 2021. It was camera that, that operators had to track, and there was all sorts of crazy calibration, and it gets better and better, and it's being done with fixed cameras, and wait until it's being done with sky cams and drones and all that other other really cool stuff. It's just going to make that experience more and more like you are there.
I mean, ultimately, it sounds like, there's just going to be more and more innovation, making the level of the product better. But yeah, I think those are really cool things to keep an eye out, and also to be paying attention to in the coming years and also in the present. So now I did want to kind of talk about, we've kind of covered a lot of things. Big reflection question here. You've produced 10 Olympics, you've won 3 rings in the MLB, 1 ring in the NFL. You've done it all. What would you say is, your most proud accomplishment or moment in your career?
Being a dad is the most proud and biggest accomplishment in my life. And being a husband. So I always put things in perspective. In my career, it's hard to pinpoint just one. I'm proud of a lot of accomplishments in a lot of different ways. I'm proud that if I go to a particular city, wherever it is, all over the world, that there's folks that I've worked with and had success with, and can pick up the phone and reach out to them and meet up with them. I'm proud of that. I'm proud to have work with so many talented people and see their careers grow. This is a lot of people that started out with me, and they're doing incredible stuff. John Sadak worked for me in the scoreboard broadcasting department with the New York Yankees, and now he's the voice of the Cincinnati Reds. Ryan Rucco worked with me in the Yankees scoreboard and broadcasting department, and now he's all over ABC calling WNBA, NBA. Gosh, he was calling the NCAA women's tournament yesterday. So really happy to see those folks do so well. Um, so it's hard to pinpoint one accomplishment. I always say that I've been doing this for 30 plus years, but one of these days I'm going to have to get a real job, right? So I hope to be able to say that until retirement, and I don't know that I'll know what retirement really is. Hopefully, I still get to do the Olympics every 2 years.
Well, I mean, you've accomplished quite a lot, quite a humble guy, talking about the family and all your prior coworkers. I really wanted to say I appreciate you taking the time. This is all for me. I don't have any more questions for you, but is there anything you wanted to leave off with?
No, just the most important thing that I could say is um, it is an undervalued thing about just loving the event. There's a lot of people who say, oh, I'm doing this event, or I'm doing this sport, or for this team, or it's this low level minor league, or whatever it is, Division 3 high school, doesn't matter. It's a love the event. It means something to the athletes participating, to the parents watching. I always have this conversation when I'm on the headset with the college band directors, and I'll say like, "Hey, I want to hear from you guys as much as we can. I want to showcase your musicians. It's as important to them as it is to the athletes out on the field." And they're always like, "Whoa, thanks, that's incredible," and it's the truth. I joke with the crew that we're gonna showcase kids during pregame warmups for football, and I don't care if it's the backup snapper. They're on the team. We're gonna identify them. Their parents know that they're on the team, and we're gonna show them, and it's a proud moment, for those folks. And if I can make people happy in what I do. I'm not curing cancer. I'm just putting up some crowd shots and creating moments and having some great music, some great videos, and you hope that the crowd reacts to the way that you hope they did when you planned it out in your mind. and they hope that it provides some juice for the team that you're working for on the field. And the end of the day, you walk away with that good feeling of, I put on a pretty good show today, and people walked away happy. And really, that all comes down to the love of the event, and doing it with people that, at this point, when I go to particular places, it's like being back with family. And when you travel as much as I do, and you're on the road, it's nice to have a second family in a particular city that's your crew. They're your people that you can trust, and they can trust you. And it's a good feeling of, yeah, you know what? I may be away for, a week, 10 days, 3 weeks, whatever it is. And I have my family back home, but I have a really good support system that's there, working alongside of me and having that same goal of success and wanting to make a difference.
That's awesome. And there's a lot to take away from what was said today. I mean, lots of lessons. You are, a very accomplished person in the industry and, like you were saying, very passionate about the industry. It's always great to sit down with someone who has, that fire, that passion about the production space or sports media in general. But I did want to say thank you so much for your time. This has been an incredible episode, incredible conversation, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me on, Chase. Really appreciate it. And yeah, don't hesitate to reach out if I can do anything again for you in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike.